Welcome back to the C block of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Alaina Pinto. In Michigan, the fight against the 24% tax hike has moved into the courthouse. Plus, online hemp sales might be banned after the feds put intoxicating hemp products on a 1-year notice. And what impact will that have in Michigan? Here's Amie Carter with the Michigan Report, now sponsored by Wally's Wonderworld of customizable handmade humidors.
This is mold on wheat, this is mold on weed, and this is what this Wonderworld plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com. And never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters, bringing you this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Let's jump into the green rush of stories for this week. Michigan regulators are stirring the pot with a confusing new memo. They reportedly want dispensaries to flag customers who buy more than the legal possession limit, which is 2.5 ounces. The catch: stores are still allowed to complete the sale. This vague guidance has retailers scratching their heads, leaving them frustrated and stuck between a rock and a legal limit. Graham's Cannabis is now open around the clock at their 2 locations, in Mount Morris and Romeo. The dispensaries will be open 24/7 from now on, allowing people to get cannabis at any time. Following years of explosive growth, especially in areas near state borders where out-of-staters fuel the market, some local communities are saying, hold up. Voters in Menominee, Niles, and Lima townships just passed measures to limit the number of dispensaries in their neighborhoods. It seems some communities are trying to keep their borders green, but not too crowded. Michigan's cannabis market saw one of its biggest month-over-month sales decline since recreational sales began in late 2019. Some analysts point to market oversaturation, lower pricing, and a possible plateau in consumer demand. It looks like the Great Lakes State's green rush might be hitting a little speed bump. And speaking of speed bumps in the road, we need to talk about what's happening behind the scenes at our state capitol. We are still dealing with some concerning bills in Lansing. These bills propose new restrictions that could significantly impact Michiganders. They are currently still in committee and have not yet been called for a vote. Michigan Weedsters is doing its best to educate Michiganders on what these proposed restrictions could mean for you. To learn more and stay updated, visit Michigan Weedsters on Instagram or Facebook. That's all the buzz for this week. I'm Amie Carter with Michigan Weedsters reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by wallyswonderworld.com.
Washington State is one of the first states to decriminalize possession of cannabis. Matthew Friedlander is a business owner and an advocate for medical cannabis and involved with the Cannabis Alliance in Washington. This week, he is on location at a summit for medicinal products and shares his thoughts about the importance of educating all people about this plant, but especially medical patients. Here's Matthew.
Hi, my name is Matthew Friedlander, owner of Skagit Organics, coming to you with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast. So I am here in Tacoma today at the Medical Cannabis Summit hosted by the Cannabis Alliance, Washington's largest and most effective cannabis trade group. And we were discussing today centering patients in the conversation around medical cannabis. So a lot of times when we're talking about medical cannabis, we often come at it from the perspective of the industry, the businesses and the licenses, and the regulatory side of things. And today was a lot of talk about what are the needs of the patients, how do we educate patients to even know about the medical cannabis program here in Washington State, how do we educate the providers and reduce the stigma for them to be able to recommend cannabis to their patients coming through the doors. It was a great conversation, and again, just so great to get together with our community here in Washington State. Always excited to be able to gather in person and discuss these types of topics. So that's what I've got for you out of Washington this week. We will be back next week with more news for you out of Washington State. I am Matthew reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
In one of the newest states to legalize adult use sales of cannabis, Minnesota is slowly rolling out opportunities for licensees. But there are few more concerns in a new state, like will there be any product to sell? Just one of the concerns in Minnesota and all new states to adult use sales. Alysha Bellamy tells us about some towns and cities who are still deciding if they even want stores inside their borders. Here's Alysha.
I'm Alysha Bellamy. For Cannabis Coast to Coast News, this is your Minnesota report. 13 Minnesota cities are actively exploring launching municipal retail stores under the new adult use framework. Anoka, Blaine, Buffalo, Byron, Elk River, Grand Rapids, Lauderdale, Moundsview, St. Anthony Village, St. Joseph, Osseo, Owatonna, and Wyoming are exploring the liquor store approach to cannabis. The Can Grow Grant awardees will be announced December 2025, which teaches farmers how to grow a cash crop. The Can Renew Grant is still open until January 12th, 2026, 4:30 p.m. This is the second round. This grant offers communities that have been negatively affected by the war on cannabis and otherwise distressed communities. The bottleneck still grows and grows in the supply chain, with no licensed transporters and only 2 licensed testing facilities and just a handful of cultivators in place to grow, leaves Minnesota at a bottleneck. I'm Alysha Bellamy for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. This is your Minnesota Report.
Of course, any movement in the cannabis or hemp space has some kind of impact on the stock market. And when it comes to the volatile nature of publicly traded companies, we turn to our man who is high on Wall Street, Doug Miller. The big question this week is, what impact did the federal hemp ban have on Wall Street? Here's Doug.
I'm Doug Miller from High on Wall Street with this week's Cannabis Stock Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Congress has passed legislation starting next year that will ban most consumable hemp-derived cannabinoid products, including popular edibles, drinks, topicals, and Delta H THC style items. The U.S. hemp-derived cannabinoid market is estimated around $28 billion and supporting roughly 300,000 jobs. With the new rules capping THC content to 0.4 milligrams per container and redefining what qualifies as legal hemp, industry insiders are warning up to 95% of current hemp product sales could vanish. For publicly traded cannabis companies, the implications are serious. Firms with hemp product lines face lost revenue, costly reformulation, tighter regulation, and higher compliance burden. Investors are already reacting as valuations have dipped and risk premiums are rising. So let's look at the ETF MSOS as it dipped 16% on the news. It's trading around $3.36, and it looks like it could continue to pull back. That is why it's so important to trade smart and lock in those profits. And that's this week's Cannabis Stock Report. Reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News, I'm Doug Miller.
One state that loves to ban products and implement their political power on state business is the state of Ohio. They were already going to ban intoxicating hemp products, and now they have the feds to get it all started. Here's Christina Brisson with our Ohio report.
Hi, I'm Christina Brisson with Over the Top Renovations with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Not a whole lot going on in Ohio right now, and I'll get into that in a second. But for those of you that live in Talmadge, Ohio, they just got their first dispensary, first one ever since the legalization of cannabis. So congratulations. But as to why we have no more movement, since the whole reopening of the government or partial, they have now decided to ban intoxicating hemp products. So now the argument here is just changing the whole discussion about us regulating it. But Ohio is also saying, we're not sure if we're going to comply, when we already don't comply with federal cannabis rules, so why not this too? So more to come as this kind of unfolds. Thank you. I am Christina Brisson with your weekly Ohio Cannabis Report with Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Our last story comes courtesy of Steve Bloom, the celeb stoner out of New York City. And according to our executive producer, Jimmy Young, who you might know as a TV sports talk host for 6 years in Boston, that the sport of basketball has been the most friendly for cannabis users in comparison to other sports. Well, former Celtics star Paul Pierce has a financial interest in the industry, as does the glove Gary Payton. And now Carmelo Anthony has a strain called Stay Mellow. Anthony had a Hall of Famer career with the New York Knicks, and now every time the Knicks play, you can get a 20% discount on his strain from a dispensary in the city called Culture House. One final note. One of the first NBA players to get suspended for drugs in the 1980s when cocaine was the drug of choice has passed away. Michael Ray Richardson was an admitted user and abuser who failed 3 drug tests before getting banned from the league in 1986. He died this week at the age of 70, but he was one of the first professional athletes to be pro-cannabis. The NBA has always been the most tolerant about the treatment of their players, and now they don't even test for cannabis. The jury is still out if the plant medicine is a performance enhancer or a performance diminisher. Well, what do you think? You can leave a comment on that on our YouTube channel. And that'll do it for this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so consume it responsibly. I'm Alaina Pinto. We leave you now with more of the interview on the impact on the hemp industry ban with our executive producer, Jimmy Young, and Carrie Hinkle, along with Jonathan Miller, General Counsel of the U.S. Hemp Roundtable. We'll see you next week.